It's the sound of silence that haunts her the most. For years, Christine has heard it, the sound of hope slowly fading. With each passing month, the emptiness in her heart grows. It's not the silence of a peaceful night, but the deafening, oppressive kind, where the ticking of the clock feels like a countdown to the end of something that never truly began. She's tried everything: IVF, acupuncture, diet changes, even the desperate suggestion of eating pineapple every day, but nothing works. It doesn't matter how many times she prays, how many times she closes her eyes and wishes for a miracle. The answer is always the same: negative, always negative. You'd think after all these years, the sting of disappointment would fade, but it doesn't, it only deepens. Every time that little test stick tells her that she's not pregnant, it feels like a knife, stabbing right into the core of her womanhood. Every failed attempt adds to the weight she carries. She is suffocating in a world of what-ifs and maybe next time. Christine isn't just grieving the inability to have a child, she's grieving the life she thought she would have. The life where she would be a mother by 25, with at least 3 children by the time she turned 30. She dreamed of a big family, of a home filled with laughter and the chaos of little feet running through the halls. But now, she's just trying to survive each day without falling apart. There are days when she can't even look at Sam, her husband, without feeling the weight of all the empty promises. She watches him from across the room, his face a mask of indifference, as she feels like she's disappearing in front of him. The love they once shared, the love she thought was unshakable, has crumbled beneath the pressure of unmet expectations and unspoken grief. He doesn't understand her pain. How could he? He hasn't lived it. It's not his body that's failing. It's not his heart breaking into pieces every time they attend another family gathering, where every other woman is pregnant or already has children. It's not his fault, yet somehow it feels like it is. Her desperation has become a ghost that haunts her every moment. She's tried everything. The doctors assure her that everything is fine, that there's no reason she shouldn't be able to conceive. But she knows better. She knows that deep down, something inside of her is broken. She feels it in her bones, in the way she looks at other people's children and wonders, why not me? What did I do wrong? Where did I fail? The tears never come when she needs them most. They stay locked behind a barrier she can't seem to break, trapped by the overwhelming weight of hopelessness. It's not that she doesn't want to cry, it's that she doesn't know where to begin. How do you cry when you've exhausted every possibility, when you've given everything you have, and it still isn't enough? Every piece of advice given to her by well-meaning friends and family stings. Just relax, they say it'll happen when you least expect it. Have you tried this supplement? My friend got pregnant after taking it. Maybe you should stop thinking about it so much. It'll come naturally. As if it's that simple. As if a woman's deepest desire to become a mother can be turned on and off like a switch. As if her body could just relax and magically produce the child she's been longing for. But they don't understand, do they? They don't know what it feels like to live with this constant, gnawing fear that you'll never get to experience motherhood. The fear that you'll never know the joy of holding your own baby, of seeing a little version of yourself or your partner grow and learn and laugh. It feels like a dream that's slipping further away, just out of reach. And then, as if the universe decided that her pain hadn't been enough, she discovers Sam's affair. The betrayal cuts deep, deeper than anything she's felt before. In one moment, the man she trusted more than anyone else in the world becomes a stranger. It's not just the physical act of cheating that hurts her, it's the emotional abandonment. It's the realization that he no longer sees her as his partner, the woman he vowed to love and cherish. How could he? How could he look her in the eyes every day, knowing what she's going through, and still carry on with Alice, his secretary? That night, Christine lies awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing. She can't breathe, she can't think. All she feels is the pain, the searing hurt that has been building up for years. She's spent so much time focusing on trying to get pregnant, trying to make her body cooperate, that she never stopped to think about whether Sam was still truly invested in their marriage. Now, she knows the answer, and it feels like a punch to the gut. She is alone, she is completely alone in this. But as she stands there, devastated and broken, she also feels something else rising up within her, a flicker of anger. How dare he do this to her? How dare he betray her when all she has ever wanted was to give him the family he said he wanted to? How could he turn his back on her now, after everything she has sacrificed? Christine feels the anger and the hurt swirl together, but there's also something else in the mix. Hope. Hope for a new beginning. Hope that maybe, just maybe, she can still find happiness. Maybe there's someone out there who will truly see her, who will love her the way she deserves to be loved. And yet, even as she clings to that tiny glimmer of hope, Christine knows that this journey has only just begun. The road ahead will be painful, full of heartbreak and difficult decisions. But one thing is for certain. She is done living in the shadows of a failed dream. She is done waiting for a miracle that may never come. Call to action. If you've been touched by Christine's story, if you can relate to the struggles of infertility or emotional betrayal, please subscribe to this channel. Your support helps us create more content that speaks to the heart of real-life experiences. Engagement question. Now, I want to hear from you. If you were in Christine's shoes, what would you do? Would you stay and fight for your marriage, or would you choose to walk away and build a new life? Comment your answer below. A stay and fight for the marriage. B walk away and start a new chapter. Your thoughts matter. Share them with us in the comments. The betrayal came at a time when Christine had convinced herself that the worst was behind her. She had suffered through the sting of disappointment, the pain of failed attempts at becoming a mother, and yet, she had believed that her marriage would be the one thing that would remain untouched. It wasn't just about the love they had once shared, but about everything they had built together, the trust, the promises, the future they had planned. But nothing could have prepared her for the gut-wrenching moment when she discovered the truth. It wasn't a simple revelation. It didn't come with a loud crash, a dramatic confession, or a tear-filled confrontation. No. It was the quiet kind of betrayal that sinks deep into the bones. It was the kind that creeps up slowly, unnoticed, until one day, it is too big to ignore. And when Christine finally saw it, when the pieces of the puzzle snapped together with startling clarity, she felt her world collapse in a way she never thought possible. She had always trusted Sam, with everything. In a world where nothing seemed certain, he had been her rock. Even after years of disappointment, after failed treatments and the endless cycles of hope and despair, he had been the one constant. He had been the one who held her when the weight of it all felt too much to bear, the one who reassured her that everything would be all right. But that day, as Christine stood in the doorway, watching him with Alice, she knew. She knew that everything she thought she understood about their marriage had been a lie. She had walked into the house expecting nothing more than the usual quiet evening. But what she found instead was a reality so far from what she had imagined, so far from what she had believed in. The sight of Sam and Alice together, his secretary, the woman he had always spoken about with casual admiration, shattered her in an instant. They were not just physically close. There was an intimacy in their connection, a familiarity that screamed of something deeper, something that went beyond a fleeting moment of weakness. No, this was something planned, something intentional. And it hurt more than any accusation or doubt she had ever had. For a moment, Christine stood frozen in the doorway. Her mind raced, trying to make sense of what she was seeing, trying to find an explanation that would make sense of the impossibility of it all. But there was none. Sam, the man she had given everything to, the man she had shared her deepest dreams and fears with, was in the arms of someone else. And Alice, that woman she had known for so long, the one she had trusted as part of their professional life, was no longer just an acquaintance. She was the other woman, the one who had taken her place, taken the trust she had so freely given. Christine wanted to scream. She wanted to tear the world apart, to shout at them for the betrayal, for the lies, but nothing came out. Her throat tightened, her heart ached, and her world, already fragile, crumbled. She felt like she had been hit by a freight train, and yet, there was no physical pain. It was all internal. The emotional pain of realizing that Sam had never truly been hers in the way she thought. That the life they had built, the future they had envisioned, was nothing more than an illusion. What hurt even more was the realization that this was not just a one-time mistake. This wasn't a moment of weakness or a lapse in judgment. AM had been having an affair with Alice for months, perhaps longer. The intimacy between them wasn't accidental, it was calculated, deliberate. It was the slow-burning kind of betrayal that wears away at the foundation of a relationship until there's nothing left to stand on. And what made it worse was that Sam had known. He had known all along that Christine would find out eventually, but even in the face of that, he hadn't stopped. He had continued with Alice, continued living a double life while pretending everything was fine with Christine. As Christine stood there, watching them scramble to pull themselves together, the truth of the situation hit her hard. Sam was not sorry, he wasn't even ashamed. His actions spoke louder than any words ever could. He didn't have to say anything. His lack of remorse, the way he seemed more concerned about getting dressed than about the devastation he had caused, made it painfully clear. This wasn't just an affair, it was the slow, steady unraveling of everything Christine had held dear. And there, in that moment, everything changed for Christine. Her vision blurred as she turned and walked out of the room. She didn't say a word. She couldn't. There were no words that could capture the depth of her hurt, no words that could make sense of the chaos swirling inside her. She couldn't even bring herself to face Sam. It was as though she had been reduced to nothing more than a spectator in her own life, watching the destruction of everything she had ever wanted, everything she had ever trusted. For hours, Christine sat in the quiet of their home, her mind replaying the scene over and over again. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Sam and Alice together. She heard their laughter, their whispered conversations, and it was like she couldn't escape it. The betrayal had become a constant presence in her life, a shadow that she couldn't shake. And yet, even as the pain threatened to consume her, there was a small voice deep inside her that whispered, "You deserve better, you deserve more than this." But how? How could she walk away from everything she had built? How could she leave the man she had shared her life with, the man who had been her partner in so many ways? She didn't have the answers. All she had was the overwhelming pain of realizing that the man she had loved was not the man she thought he was. And that, more than anything, was the hardest part to accept. Sam was not who she had imagined him to be. And as she sat there, her heart breaking into pieces, Christine understood something crucial. She had given so much of herself to him, to their marriage, that she had forgotten to protect the most important person in her life, herself. The truth was, Christine could never go back to what they had. Not after this, not after seeing the raw truth of Sam's betrayal. She didn't know what the future held, she didn't know where this path would lead. But what she did know was that she couldn't stay in a relationship that had become a lie, no matter how much she had once believed in it. She was broken, but she would heal, and she would find her way again. In the weeks that followed the revelation of Sam's betrayal, Christine found herself in a fog, an emotional haze that clouded her every decision. Her life, once filled with routine and quiet hopes for the future, had been turned upside down. The pain of his infidelity was raw, a constant ache that seemed to have taken root deep within her chest. Yet, amid the rubble of her broken marriage, something unexpected began to shift. It wasn't immediate, but it was undeniable. It began with Stan. She hadn't seen him in years. They had lost touch after college, both busy with their separate lives, yet his name had always lingered in the back of her mind. When he had reached out, it was almost like a small, surprising burst of light in the darkness. He had been a friend in her youth, a constant in a world that often seemed to make no sense. He had always known how to make her laugh, how to ease her worries, and the familiarity of that friendship felt like a breath of fresh air in a room that had long been stale. Their reunion wasn't grand or dramatic. It didn't come with the kind of fanfare one might expect after years of silence. It was simply an exchange of messages at first, followed by a few casual phone calls. But with every word, with every shared memory of their younger days, Christine felt something stir inside her, something that had been buried deep, something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time. It was comfort, it was safety, it was a fleeting, gentle reassurance that maybe she wasn't completely lost. When they finally met, it was as if time had never passed. Stan hadn't changed much in the way he looked. Maybe his jawline had become a bit sharper, his hair a bit shorter, but his presence still felt the same. He exuded warmth, the kind of warmth that made her feel seen, understood. And that, perhaps, was the first time in months she truly felt like herself again. Not Sam's wife, not the woman struggling with infertility, but simply Christine, the woman who had once been full of dreams, who had once felt whole. They didn't talk about the hurt, not immediately. At first, it was light, easy conversation, catching up on old times, reminiscing about their shared experiences. But as the hours passed, and as the sun dipped lower in the sky, something in the air shifted. Stan was the first to notice it. Of course, he always had that ability to read her, to sense when something was wrong. He wasn't oblivious to her pain. He didn't ignore it or pretend it didn't exist, but he also didn't push her to confront it until she was ready. And when she finally spoke, it all came pouring out. The betrayal, the heartbreak, the years of trying, of desperately wanting something that had never come. Her feelings of failure, of being discarded. She spoke in broken sentences, her words tangled with tears, but with each word she spoke, she felt a bit lighter, as though she were peeling away layers of grief she had kept hidden for so long. Stan listened. He didn't interrupt or offer solutions. He simply held space for her, the kind of presence that felt more healing than anything she could have imagined. There was something about Stan that felt like home. It wasn't romantic at first, not in the way one might expect. It was a deep, comforting familiarity, a reminder of a time when she wasn't defined by the struggles she was facing now. When she was simply Christine, full of hope, full of life. The more time they spent together, the more Christine realized that perhaps she had been so focused on Sam's betrayal, on her desire for a child, that she had forgotten what it felt like to simply live. She had forgotten what it meant to laugh without the weight of the world on her shoulders, to be with someone who made her feel light again. She had forgotten what it was like to be seen for who she truly was. It wasn't long before Stan began to open up to her as well. He wasn't perfect, no one is. He had his own struggles, his own heartaches, but there was something about his vulnerability that drew her in even further. They were both broken in their own ways, but instead of pushing each other away, they found a connection, a safe, quiet place where they could simply be. In a strange way, it was healing. It wasn't about replacing Sam or moving on too quickly. It was about finding a connection again, not with the man who had betrayed her, but with herself. With a life that had once been full of promise, a life that she could still claim for herself. And so, as days turned into weeks, Christine began to notice changes within herself. The heaviness that had once clouded her heart, the darkness that had crept in after Sam's affair, slowly began to lift. It wasn't that the pain was gone, it wasn't that she had completely forgiven Sam or that the journey of healing was over. No, it was more subtle than that. It was the simple realization that she was allowed to heal. That she wasn't bound to the pain of the past forever. With Stan by her side, she found herself laughing more. Not out of force, but because it felt right. Because for the first time in a long time, she felt like there was still joy to be found, still hope to be reclaimed. She didn't need to have all the answers. She didn't need to understand everything that had happened to her. What she needed, perhaps, was time to rediscover the woman she had once been. Time to let the wounds heal at their own pace. Stan never pushed her. He was patient, understanding, and most importantly, he never tried to replace Sam. He didn't want to. He simply wanted to be there for her in whatever way she needed. And in that quiet, unspoken kindness, Christine began to realize something important. She didn't have to go through this alone, and more than that, she deserved more than a life filled with pain and betrayal. She deserved to feel loved again, truly loved, not because someone needed her to be something else, but because she was enough as she was. The beginning of their connection wasn't about romance. It wasn't about finding someone new to fill the void Sam had left. It was about Christine learning to be present in her own life again, to acknowledge her own worth and her own strength. She had lived for years in the shadows of her marriage, in the shadow of her inability to conceive. But now, with Stan by her side, she was beginning to live in the light again. In that light, she saw something she had lost sight of long ago, the possibility of a new beginning, not just with Stan, but for herself. A chance to rediscover who she was, to rebuild her life on her own terms, without the constraints of past failures or betrayals. She wasn't just moving forward, she was evolving. And that was the first step toward truly healing. It was a slow journey, but with every moment shared with Stan, with every laugh and every quiet conversation, Christine was reminded that new beginnings weren't always planned. Sometimes they simply emerge from the darkest places, like seeds growing in soil that once seemed barren. And for the first time in a long while, Christine felt hope, real hope. Not the kind that depended on others, but the kind that started from within. The discovery of her pregnancy was a moment Christine had waited for so desperately, and yet, when it finally came, it left her feeling more conflicted than ever before. She had spent years hoping, praying for this exact moment, the moment when she would see a positive test, feel the first flutter of life inside her. But when she saw those 2 lines on the pregnancy test, she felt a rush of emotions that were anything but joyful. At first, she thought it was a mistake. Perhaps the test was faulty. She'd had so many disappointments before. For years of testing, of trying, of hoping only to face the crushing weight of emptiness each time she saw that single line. It couldn't be real, not after everything. She had already braced herself for the disappointment. It had become second nature, like an old, familiar companion. But as she stared at the test in her trembling hands, she couldn't ignore the truth any longer. The lines were there, she was pregnant. Her heart raced as a strange wave of panic washed over her. She clutched the test to her chest, her breath shallow, her hands shaking. She felt everything and nothing at once. There was a part of her that wanted to jump for joy, to scream out with happiness, to finally let out the tears that had been building up for years. But there was another part, a deeper part, that felt a gnawing, unshakable fear. The timing couldn't have been worse. She wasn't ready for this. She wasn't sure she would ever be ready, and with Sam still so clearly absent from her life, she couldn't help but wonder if this baby, the miracle she had dreamed of for so long, was simply another burden she wasn't prepared to carry. Sam wasn't there when she needed him the most. He hadn't been there for months, not in the way she had once relied on him to be. Their marriage had become a fragile thread, a lifeline that was barely hanging on. She had wanted this baby more than anything, but now, with the truth of Sam's betrayal and the realization that her life was about to change in a way she wasn't ready for, she felt completely alone. The weight of this pregnancy felt like a double-edged sword. On one hand, it was the answer to her prayers. On the other, it was a constant reminder of everything that had gone wrong. Christine wandered through the house, her mind racing. She had always pictured herself as a mother, but now that it was finally happening, it felt like a cruel twist of fate. She couldn't help but wonder if she could do this alone. The thought of raising a child without the support of Sam, a man who had betrayed her so completely, felt impossible. Was she really ready to bring a new life into the world when she was still struggling to put the pieces of her own heart back together? She sank down onto the couch, clutching her stomach as if trying to shield the baby from the uncertainty she felt. She hadn't expected this. She hadn't expected to feel so torn, so conflicted. It wasn't supposed to be like this. She had imagined a perfect moment, a perfect life, a perfect family. Instead, she was faced with a reality that was messy, uncertain, and full of doubt. As her mind spiraled, she thought about Stan. She had grown so close to him over the past few weeks. He had been there for her in ways that Sam never had been. He listened, he cared, he didn't judge. But as much as she cared for Stan, she couldn't imagine him being the father of her child. The thought of involving him in this was both comforting and terrifying. She didn't want to burden him with something that wasn't his responsibility, something that was born out of a marriage that had crumbled. But Stan was there, he was real. He wasn't the man who had cheated on her. He wasn't the man who had shattered her trust. He was someone who saw her, who understood her, who made her feel like she was worth something again. She thought about how he had supported her, how he had never pushed her, how he had stood by her even when the world seemed to be falling apart. Could she turn to him now, in this moment, when she felt so lost? The guilt of it all weighed heavily on her. She didn't want to drag Stan into this. She didn't want to ask him to take on the burden of raising a child that wasn't his. And yet, the idea of doing this alone, of carrying this pregnancy in isolation, felt unbearable. Could she be a mother without Sam by her side? Could she raise this child alone, without the love and support of the man who was supposed to be her partner. For hours, Christine wrestled with herself, torn between the desire to protect her child and the fear of what it would mean for her future. She wanted to be strong. She wanted to be the kind of woman who could face this head-on, who could navigate this difficult situation with grace and courage. But the truth was, she didn't know if she had it in her. She didn't know if she was strong enough to take on this responsibility on her own. When she finally picked up the phone to call Stan, she did so with trembling hands. She needed to talk to someone. She needed to hear a voice that didn't belong to Sam, a voice that would listen without judgment. As the phone rang, her heart pounded in her chest. She wasn't sure what she would say. She wasn't even sure what she needed to hear. Hello. Stan's voice came through the line, warm and steady, a stark contrast to the chaos swirling inside her. Stan, she whispered, her voice trembling. I need to talk, and she did. She told him everything, the pregnancy, her fears, her doubts, her uncertainty about the future. She told him how torn she was, how much she wanted this baby, but how impossible it felt. And as she spoke, Stan listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't try to fix her. He simply let her pour out her heart. When she finished, there was a long pause on the other end of the line. She braced herself for his response, unsure of what to expect. Finally, Stan spoke, his voice calm and reassuring. You don't have to do this alone, Christine, he said quietly. I'm here. You're not alone. The words hit her like a wave, washing over her with a relief she hadn't expected. For the first time in so long, she felt seen, she felt understood. And even though the future was still uncertain, even though she still had a long road ahead of her, she realized something important in that moment. She didn't have to face it all by herself. Stan wasn't offering her an easy solution. He wasn't offering her a perfect ending. But he was offering her something more precious than anything she had hoped for: support, understanding, and the chance to rebuild. With him, she could see a future where she wasn't just a mother, but someone who was allowed to be human, to make mistakes, to struggle, and still be loved. And as she hung up the phone, her hand resting gently on her stomach, she felt something shift inside her. She wasn't sure what the future would hold. But in that moment, she knew she could face it, not because she had all the answers, but because she no longer had to face it alone. Christine had spent weeks vacillating between hope and despair, between love and loss. Her heart, once filled with dreams of a perfect family, now beat in uncertain rhythms. The moment she discovered she was pregnant, she had been consumed by a whirlwind of emotions. At first, she was numb, unable to reconcile the idea of carrying a child while still reeling from the brutal betrayal of her husband. But as the weeks wore on, and as the quiet, steady presence of Stan entered her life, something began to shift. She had always prided herself on being strong, on being able to navigate the complexities of her life without needing help from anyone. But the truth was, the weight of it all, the betrayal, the heartbreak, the uncertainty of motherhood, was too much to bear alone. When she called Stan, something changed inside her. He didn't try to fix her. He didn't offer empty words of reassurance. He simply listened. He let her speak, let her voice the pain and the doubts she had been carrying for so long. And in that moment, something inside her heart cracked open, just enough to let in a little light. It was with Stan that Christine began to realize the depth of her own strength. It wasn't that she didn't love Sam, she did, in the way that a person loves a memory, a version of someone who is no longer there. She loved the man she had married, the man who had promised to stand by her through thick and thin, but that man was gone. In his place was a stranger who had shattered the trust they had built, who had taken away the future they had dreamed of together. No amount of longing, no amount of hope could change that fact. Sam had betrayed her, and in doing so, he had also betrayed the future they had promised each other. Stan, on the other hand, was different. He hadn't asked for this. He hadn't asked to be dragged into her pain, to carry the weight of her broken heart, but he had stepped in anyway. He had been there for her in ways that Sam never had been, offering her a quiet support that was both comforting and empowering. It wasn't love at first sight, it wasn't a fairy tale, but it was real. And for the first time in a long time, Christine allowed herself to believe that there could be something beyond the wreckage of her marriage. It wasn't easy to let go of Sam, not entirely. He had been her partner for years, her companion through thick and thin. They had built a life together, or at least, that's what she had believed. And even though the truth of his affair had shattered her, she still found herself clinging to the hope that perhaps, just perhaps, they could rebuild. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized that rebuilding with Sam wasn't possible. She couldn't unsee what she had seen. She couldn't erase the hurt, the broken promises, the lies that had come to define their relationship. There was no going back. It was time to move forward. The decision wasn't easy. Nothing about this process had been easy. Divorce was a painful, agonizing step, a final acknowledgement that the dreams she had once had with Sam were no longer hers to hold. But it was also a step toward freedom, toward reclaiming the life she had lost. She had spent too long questioning herself, questioning her worth, wondering if she was enough. The truth was, she was enough. She had always been enough. And if she was going to be the kind of mother she wanted to be, the kind of woman she needed to be, she had to leave the past behind. The day she called Sam to tell him she was filing for divorce, her hands trembled. It wasn't the fear of being alone that made her hesitate. It wasn't the uncertainty of the future that held her back. It was the finality of it all. She had given Sam so much of herself. She had trusted him with her dreams, her heart, and the future they had planned together. Letting go of that was a form of grief she wasn't sure she could bear. But as the conversation unfolded, she felt a strange sense of relief. Sam's words were empty, his apologies meaningless. He still hadn't changed. He still hadn't taken responsibility for what he had done. And in that moment, Christine knew that this was the right choice. She couldn't keep living in the shadow of his mistakes. Filing for divorce was a release, but it was also the beginning of something new. It wasn't just about moving on from Sam, it was about moving on for herself. She had spent so much time focusing on the hopes of becoming a mother, on the dream of having a family with Sam, that she had lost sight of who she was. But now, with the child growing inside her, she could see a new path. It wasn't the path she had envisioned, but it was a path nonetheless. And with Stan by her side, she knew that she wouldn't have to walk it alone. Stan never pressured her to make a decision. He never asked her to choose him over Sam. He simply made his intentions clear. He was there for her, no matter what. And that was enough. He respected her choices. He respected her pain. He understood that the road ahead would be difficult, but he was willing to walk it with her. That kind of unconditional support was something Christine had never known. And as she moved forward with the divorce, as she took steps toward healing, she realized that Stan wasn't just a temporary source of comfort. He was someone who could be part of her future. He was someone who could help her build the life she had once thought was out of reach. The decision to move forward with Stan was not about erasing Sam from her life. It was about reclaiming her own sense of self, her own sense of worth. She had spent so long focusing on the idea of a perfect family with Sam, but now she understood that perfection wasn't the goal. The goal was to create a life that was hers, a life that was full of love, honesty, and authenticity. And as she signed the divorce papers, as she took that final step, she felt a sense of peace settle in her heart. It wasn't the kind of peace that came from having all the answers. It wasn't the kind of peace that came from the certainty of the future. But it was the peace of knowing that she had made the right choice. She was no longer living in the past. She was no longer defined by the mistakes of others. She was moving forward, and she was doing it for herself, for her baby, and for the future that awaited her. In the months that followed, as Christine prepared for the birth of her child, she began to realize something that had eluded her for so long. Life was not about perfection. It was about resilience. It was about embracing the messiness of it all, the heartbreak, the betrayal, the uncertainty, and finding beauty in the midst of it. And with Stan by her side, she knew that she could face whatever came next. Together, they would build a new life, a new family. And for the first time in a long time, Christine felt hope, real hope, the kind that came from within. The journey that Christine underwent, from the pain of betrayal to the eventual decision to move forward with her life, is one that many of us can relate to, whether directly or indirectly. Life is unpredictable, and at times, the events we encounter can seem insurmountable. Christine's experience shows how deeply the heart can be wounded, but also how resilient the human spirit is when faced with adversity. Her story is a testament to the fact that, no matter how broken we feel, we always have the power to rebuild. The process is not easy, nor is it quick, but it is possible. Her marriage with Sam, once filled with promises of love and a shared future, crumbled under the weight of betrayal. For years, Christine had hoped, prayed, and sacrificed, only to find herself betrayed by the very person she trusted the most. The heartbreak was deep, and the feeling of failure was inevitable. But what Christine ultimately realized, and what is key for anyone going through a difficult time, is that we are not defined by our suffering. We are defined by how we rise after the fall. The moment she chose to face the truth of her marriage's breakdown and decide to move forward, she took back the power that had been unknowingly stripped from her. In that moment, Christine showed us that even in the face of overwhelming pain, we can make a choice, the choice to heal, to grow, and to move forward. One of the most powerful lessons from Christine's journey is that it's never too late to start again. Whether it's in our personal relationships, our careers, or our emotional well-being, starting over can be one of the most empowering decisions we can make. It's easy to feel like we are trapped in our circumstances, as if there's no way out. Christine spent years in that cycle, hoping for a change that never came. But when she made the difficult choice to let go of what no longer served her, she created space for something new, a chance to reclaim her life. Christine's journey also highlights the importance of support. She didn't have to go through this alone. Stan's quiet, steady presence in her life was a constant reminder that, while we may not be able to choose the pain we experience, we can choose who we allow to walk with us through it. Stan didn't force Christine to heal on his terms, nor did he try to fill the role that Sam had once held. He simply offered his support, his understanding, and his care. That is what made all the difference. In our own lives, whether in romantic relationships or friendships, it's essential to remember that we all need people who are willing to stand by us without judgment, people who are patient with our healing process. Moreover, Christine's pregnancy was a catalyst for change. At first, it filled her with dread, uncertainty, and fear of what the future would bring. But it also became a symbol of new beginnings. The child growing inside her wasn't just a new life, but the beginning of a new chapter for Christine. It's easy to view new opportunities with trepidation, especially when we are uncertain of our own strength. But Christine's story reminds us that sometimes the most unexpected gifts, like a new job, a new relationship, or a new opportunity, can also be the very things that push us to grow the most. The pregnancy was not just a blessing, it was a test of her resilience. And in choosing to move forward, she embraced the life she had always wanted, but in a new form. As we reflect on Christine's experience, one thing becomes clear. No matter how many times we are knocked down, we always have the ability to rise again. Healing takes time, it takes patience, and it takes forgiveness, not just of others, but of ourselves. We must allow ourselves to feel the pain, to grieve the loss, and to acknowledge that it's okay to not have all the answers. But we must also remember that we are the authors of our own story. Life may be full of challenges, but it's in the way we face those challenges that our true strength is revealed. In our own lives, we often face moments of crisis, whether they're in our relationships, our careers, or our personal lives. The key to overcoming these moments isn't to run away from them, but to face them head-on. It's to understand that while we can't always control what happens to us, we can always control how we respond. We must let go of the past, not in a way that erases it, but in a way that frees us to move forward. Christine's decision to move forward with Stan and the divorce wasn't easy. It was one of the hardest choices she had to make. But it was also the right one, and it led her to a life full of new possibilities. The lesson here is clear: never underestimate your own strength. Life will throw unexpected challenges your way, and it will test your resilience. But every hardship, every heartbreak, every loss carries with it the seed of a new beginning. The key is to recognize that seed, to nurture it, and to believe that the best chapters of your life are still to come. Don't be afraid to let go of what no longer serves you. Don't be afraid to make the hard choices, even when they're painful. And most importantly, never be afraid to move forward, because the future holds everything you've ever dreamed of, waiting for you to take that first step. Question for reflection: Do you believe that letting go of the past is necessary for moving forward in life? Please comment below with your thoughts on this and share your perspective with others. If you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, please consider subscribing to our channel to support more content like this. If you'd like to show your support even further, consider making a donation, no matter how small, as it will motivate us to continue sharing valuable insights and stories with you. Remember, even small contributions can make a big difference, and your support means the world to us.